Can you hear the rhythmic thrum of the city? The sound of 10,000 iron-shod hooves striking cobblestones, the hiss of steam from the harbour, and the incessant chime of church bells ringing out over a skyline that is just beginning to reach for the heavens. Close your eyes for a moment. If you were standing here in the heart of Boston in 1880, would you feel the weight of the Puritan past? Or would you be swept up in the frantic electric energy of the Gilded Age? Today, through the lens of AI Reconstruction, we are going back to a time when Boston was not just a city of history, but the undisputed hub of the universe. We have rebuilt this world from the glass plate negatives, the meticulously hand-drawn Sanborn maps, and the fading memories of a generation that saw the old world die and the new one born. The Boston of 1880 is a city in the middle of a massive identity crisis. Geographically, it is a place that has quite literally defied nature. We are standing on a peninsula that has tripled in size over the last few decades, as massive steam shovels have leveled the city's hills to fill in its marshes. To our north and east lies the Atlantic, crowded with the masts of sailing ships and the smokestacks of transatlantic liners. To our west, brand new aristocratic district is rising from the mud. Our walk today will take us from the bustling, salt-stained wharves of the waterfront, through the narrow, chaotic canyons of the financial district, past the somber majesty of the Common, and finally into the sun-drenched, Parisian-style boulevards of the Back Bay. It is a journey from the old, crooked maritime Boston to the orderly, ambitious city of the future. We begin our journey at Long Wharf, where the air is thick with the smell of wet hemp, drying cod, and coal smoke. Look around you. The forest of masts is so dense it almost obscures the sky. You see massive four-masted schooners unloading timber alongside sleek steamers carrying spices and textiles from across the globe. The granite blocks beneath your feet are slick with harbour spray, and the noise is a deafening cacophony of shouting stevedores, rattling chains, and the screech of seagulls. This wharf, built in 1710, was once the longest and busiest in North America, acting as the primary gateway for the goods that built New England's wealth. In 1880, it remains the city's commercial pulse, though the old wooden warehouses are slowly being replaced by sturdier brick structures. As we stand here, watch a group of Irish immigrants disembarking from a weathered packet ship, their faces a mix of exhaustion and desperate hope as they are processed by customs officials in wool coats. Nearby, a wealthy merchant in a silk top hat argues with a drayman over a shipment of fine China tea. This spot is the very definition of 19th century globalization. Yet, within a century, these busy slips will be filled in to create Atlantic Avenue, and the roaring maritime trade will migrate further south, leaving these granite piers to become quiet walkways for tourists and apartment dwellers. Leaving the salt air behind, we walk inland, squeezing through the narrow, winding alleys of the financial district. The sun struggles to reach the pavement here, blocked by 5-story buildings made of dark Quincy granite and red brick. The ground is a treacherous mix of mud and horse manure, and you have to step nimbly to avoid the heavy delivery wagons thundering past. This is the old Boston, where the streets still follow the erratic paths of 17th century cow pastures. Just a few years ago, in 1872, a great fire leveled much of this area. And now, in 1880, the city is rising from the dead ashes with even grander, more fireproof Victorian Gothic and Italianate architecture. We pause in front of the old State House, a survivor of the flames. It looks strangely small and delicate against the new, hulking insurance buildings and banks. You can hear the scratching of quill pens through open windows and the frantic shouts of newsboys selling the Boston Evening Transcript. This building was the seat of British power before the Revolution, the site of the Boston Massacre, and now it serves as a commercial hub for the surrounding businesses. It is a stubborn reminder of the 1700s in a world that is moving toward the 1900s, breakneck speed. One day, the skyscrapers will dwarf it even further, and a subway station, the first in America, will be dug right through its basement. But for now, it remains the anchor of the district. Continuing west, the narrow streets suddenly open up into the vast green expanse of the Boston Common. The change in atmosphere is jarring. The smell of horse manure is replaced by the scent of mown grass and the salty breeze blowing off the Charles River. In 1880, the Common is not just a park, it is the city's communal backyard. You see cows still grazing on the fringes, a tradition that is finally nearing its end, while fashionable ladies in bustles and wide-brimmed hats stroll along the long path under a canopy of massive elms. The sound here is softer, the rustle of silk, the laughter of children rolling hoops, and the occasional barking of a dog. We walk past the frog pond, where boys are sailing miniature wooden boats. The Common has survived 3 centuries of use, from a colonial training ground for the militia to a site for public hangings. In this decade, it is becoming a place of refined leisure, a refuge for a population increasingly squeezed by industrialization. Look closely at the trees. Many of them are dying from the great elm blight, a quiet tragedy that will eventually strip the park of its historic canopy. This landscape feels permanent, yet beneath our feet, engineers are already dreaming of the tunnels that will one day carry millions of commuters beneath this hallowed soil. At the edge of the Common, we face the Massachusetts State House, its wooden dome freshly gilded with gold leaf in 1874, shining like a second sun over Beacon Hill. This is the Brahmin heart of Boston. We walk up the steep, gaslit streets of Beacon Hill, where the red brick townhouses feature those iconic purple-tinted window panes, a result of manganese in the glass reacting with the sun over decades. The quiet here is absolute, broken only by the occasional clack-clack of a carriage. This is the enclave of the old elite, the families who claim descent from the Mayflower and who view the growing immigrant populations in the North End with a mixture of pity and alarm. I see a housemaid in a crisp white apron scrubbing the marble front steps of a mansion, while inside, a library is filled with the scent of old leather and tobacco. This hill was once much higher, but its peaks were sheared off to provide the fill for the land we are about to visit next. While the rest of the city evolves into a modern metropolis, Beacon Hill will remain frozen in time, protected by its own wealth and status, becoming one of the most well-preserved historic districts in the United States. Now, we descend the backside of the hill and cross Charles Street, entering a world that didn't exist 40 years ago, the Back Bay. As we step onto Commonwealth Avenue, the transformation is breathtaking. Gone are the crooked, muddy alleys of the old city. In their place is a magnificent, wide boulevard, inspired by Baron Haussmann's Paris. The streets are perfectly straight, named in alphabetical order: Arlington, Berkeley, Clarendon, Dartmouth. The houses are masterpieces of the Beaux-Arts and French Second Empire styles, with ornate stone carvings and elegant mansard roofs. The air feels cleaner here, as the prevailing winds blow the city's smoke away toward the harbour. We walk down the Central Mall, a ribbon of green parkland lined with statues of heroes. This entire district is a marvel of 19th century engineering. It was once a literal back bay of stagnant, salty water. Millions of carloads of gravel were brought in by train from the suburbs to fill it in, creating the most prestigious real estate in New England. You can see the finishing touches being put on Trinity Church in Copley Square, a massive red sandstone cathedral of the Episcopal faith. It is a symbol of the city's intellectual and spiritual confidence. It's hard to imagine that in another 100 years, a 60-story glass tower will rise right next to it, reflecting the church's ancient stones in its modern facade. Our tour concludes at the site of the new Boston Public Library, which is currently a bustling construction site. This will be the palace for the people, a testament to Boston's belief in education as the great equalizer. As the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the brand new pavement of the Back Bay, we see the first experimental electric streetlights flickering to life. They are a sign that the era of gaslight and steam is drawing to a close. Looking back at the route we've traveled, the contrast is stark. We started in a maritime world of 1700s wooden piers and ended in a 19th century urban utopia of stone and glass. If you were to walk this route today, you would find that the bones of 1880 are still there. The old State House still stands, though it is now surrounded by the skyscrapers of State Street. The Common is still the city's green heart, though the elms are gone. The Back Bay remains the most sought-after neighborhood in the city, its Victorian elegance preserved as if under glass. Boston is a city built in layers. It is a place that refuses to let go of its past, even as it aggressively builds its future. The 1880s were the decade when the modern Boston we know today was solidified, a city of high culture, immigrant grit, and engineering marvels. It was a time of immense optimism, where people believed they could literally move mountains to build a better world. Thank you for walking through the past with me. The streets of 1880 are silent now, but their story is etched into every brick and every granite block of the modern city. This reconstruction was made possible by combining historical records with the power of AI to breathe life back into a vanished world. Which city should we rebuild next? Perhaps the bustling markets of Victorian London, or the neon-soaked streets of 1920s Tokyo? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, keep looking for the layers of history beneath your feet.